Terms and conditions apply.
The Forum at 8 with Xolani Gwala.
It is now 6 minutes after 8 here on AM Live on Safm, South Africa's news and information leader. And this morning, of course, you may have heard over the past weekend, the Democratic Alliance launched a national campaign aimed at creating 1 million jobs. It's the biggest campaign that the DA has ever embarked upon outside of elections. The party telling us over the weekend that it has consulted economists and economic institutions in South Africa and from around the world on its plan for the growth of the economy and, of course, the creation of jobs in this country. Let's talk a little bit then about this plan and whether or not it is likely to deal with some of the problems that we have, some of the problems that we talk about ever so often here on the program. Can the DA's plan then help grow the economy and create jobs is the question. Please, would like to hear what your thoughts are on this all-important question. Send us an email this morning, gwalax@sabc.co.za, gwalax@sabc.co.za, but also would like to hear from you on SMS at 34701, 34701. Let's talk a little bit then about the plan. On the line, we're joined by Mr. Musi Maimane. He is the Democratic Alliance's national spokesperson. Mr. Maimane, good morning to you.
Good morning, Xolani, and good morning to all the listeners of SAFM.
Thanks indeed for your time this morning. Here with me in studio, Mr. Patrick Craven. He is the national spokesperson for COSATU. Mr. Craven, good to have you in our studios this morning.
Good morning, Xolani, and to your listeners.
Thanks indeed. All right, then, we are hoping a little later on to be joined on the line also by Mazibuko Jaha, researcher at Alternative Information and Development Center in Cape Town. He'll come through, give us his views. He's already sent us an email this morning. I'll read some of the excerpts from his email a little later on. But let me start with Mr. Maimane so that he can set the scene for us. Effectively, what are the salient points of this plan? What does it say that we should do in order to create the jobs that we need?
Well, I think, Xolani, it's important to note that against a global recession, countries the same size of our economy have all continued to grow at levels much higher than us, which seeks to propose that we need to do something uniquely different if we're going to achieve alternative results. And so some of the key issues that we focused on are essentially to say, how can we create an education system that is responsive to our economic needs? Because indeed what we note is that, to a large extent, our education objectives aren't always aligned with our economic demands. And so you end up with a labor force in some ways that is entering the economy, not always necessarily with the skills to plug some of the serious demands within the economic space. So that's at first level, the first issue that we're looking at. The second one is to say, how do we ensure that we not only increase the number of people who are employed, but we increase the number of employers? Because ultimately, those who create businesses are those who set up small businesses and are, in essence, are able to employ more and more people. And so part of our plan speaks to that. And then thirdly, we've spoken about this issue of youth unemployment, which is a continuing increase pool that we need to be able to seek to attend to. Now, at one level, we've spoken about a youth seekers voucher. At another level, we've also spoken about the youth wage subsidy on the show in terms of ensuring that we can absorb the increasing number of young people who are unemployed. And then the last two key issues are the fact that as much as this year we made a proclamation of the fact that our economic growth will be reliant on infrastructure build, the budget allocation for that has been very insufficient and certainly not strategic enough in ensuring that we build infrastructure that is geared for growth. So we need to be able to do that if we're really going to meet our economic imperatives. And then lastly, how do we ensure that we manage our tax protocol in terms of lowering it to ensure that people globally, South Africans, can be able to invest into our economy and ensure that they can get tax benefits from it. So essentially the plan looks at those 5 key components as to how you look to attend to some of the economic challenges that we're looking at.
All right, we'll probably look at them in detail in a minute, but there's absolutely nothing new in terms of raising these issues because we've spoken about education in this country. We've spoken about the role of small businesses in creating employment. Youth employment is one of the hottest and controversial issues in this country. Infrastructure growth and what we do with the 845 billion that already has been spent out there, also another issue. Tax protocol also dealt with. So some may argue that actually there's nothing new in terms of some of the issues that are being raised here.
Well, there are a number of key differentiators, which is the key issue. I mean, economic fundamentals seek to remain the same in terms of how you look at how you grow your economy. Our biggest issue is the approach and the trajectory we're facing as a country. And so when you even start as an issue of setting up small businesses, there seems to be a government imperative to set up large enterprises as we produce. We're arguing the case actually smaller is better. We're arguing the case that it's fine to have big business as an insider, but you've got to create an environment where more and more smaller ones are coming through. And the creation of small one-stop shops become key issues. The creation of government efficiency to make sure, for example, when you look at an institution like CIPRO, which is the company's registration, I'm not sure, the biggest problem of it is that to register a business today becomes such a key problem. Historically, when you look at an economic policy like SABC, and even furthermore when you look at NGPs, the new growth path, it seeks to define the economy as formal and informal. What we're arguing in the case is that actually to look at the informal sector, we've got to ask the question, what are the registration protocols there? How do we ensure that that sector is growing and we set up small business through that, and then actually local government and all sectors of government makes it easier for it.
But it's interesting, Mr. Maimane, that you raise the issue of CIPRO, because again, the argument, and I don't want this to be between you and I, but also I'm going to bring in my other guests, but the argument may very well be over the past year, 2 years, the department has done pretty well in terms of trying to make sure that registration is simpler, but at the same time, protecting copyright and protecting those that are registering their businesses.
Undeniably, when you say it's done pretty well, I think we need to be able to actually go out and practically try and register a business. It takes an inordinate amount of time. Our efficiencies are dysfunctional all across the board. And it starts even with the most basics of ensuring that when goods come into this country, how do we move them from one port to the next? Takes an inordinate amount of time compared to other economies at the same size. So the registration of business and the tapping into both sectors, both formal and informal, seems to be a very cumbersome problem, and there seems to be no incentive, even when you look at, Colin, to give you a practical example, if I try to apply for a business and a business opportunity within a local municipality, that process takes an extreme amount of time. The payment thereof takes, once you've even secured the business, seems to be taking longer and longer, which does not help a climate for small business development. Sure. These are key issues that we've got to attend to.
Sure. Finally, before I come back to my other guests, one of the things that an important element in this, and I'm surprised that you're not mentioning it, is that this is all dependent upon the economy growing at 8%. People saying that's pie in the sky, given the global economic slowdown.
When you compare us, certainly when you look at the continent we're in, countries that are of a similar space to us are growing at 6 to 8%. When you then look at broadly in other nations, economic growth, particularly in developing countries, has been good. Clearly we're doing something. When you look at us as a country, we're growing at 2.3%. So I think the facts on the table speak for themselves, that when you compare us to other countries our size, we seem to be punching way below our own weight, which we must ask some significant questions. The projected growth this year, as Minister Pravin Gordhan has put forward, is 2.3%. We have no chance of being able to correct our serious imperatives of poverty if we don't certainly pursue high growth rates. And you can look at even countries in Africa that are growing at about 6 to 8%. So I think it's unfair to say it's pie in the sky. It's very probable.
All right. Well, we'll hear what people have got to say. Let me bring in Mr. Craven here. Would you argue against some of the issues raised by the DA here? Education, businesses and their role in employment, youth employment or unemployment in this country, infrastructure growth, tax protocol. Surely these are important matters to deal with in order for us to be able to deal with the joblessness.
Absolutely, and there's nothing peculiar to the DA in supporting these things. Everybody wants to see our education system improved. We all want to see more jobs. The crucial question is how. What new solutions does this document have? And our answer would be simply none at all. This is the same old DA policy. And I think in particular it totally fails to recognize the depth of the economic crisis we face. First of all, as you mentioned, there's a world economic crisis. Other economies are not doing well in general. There are declines all over the world. And on top of that, we have a specific South African and indeed African crisis, which we inherited from the days of colonialism, of economies that are far too dependent on the export of raw materials. And therefore we have to tackle those fundamental problems.